In September 2019, we were commissioned by Mike Bloomberg with the Bloomberg Foundation to create a piece on the theme of instability for the Bloomberg Forum of Global Leaders. There are about 300 of them, and it was in conjunction with the UN General Assembly. And we took that artificial gravity machine and squished it down. We had exactly 12-foot square that we could operate in. And the edge of that square was 2 feet from the feet of all these global leaders. The theme being instability, I wanted to create a tiny artificial gravity machine so that the plug in the middle of this circle inserted into this square was 4 feet, and the actual donut was 4 foot only. So you basically had a 2 foot radius turning much faster. I asked for Maserati motors, and so the plug was turning at an enormously rapid rate, and the donut was as well. They still could go in 2 different directions, because when you're dealing with lateral space, don't you think it's shocking that there are really only 2 directions? Right? Counterclockwise or clockwise. The dancers had just gotten back from Abu Dhabi and they performed it perfectly. And this was one of those circumstances where you could not make a mistake because you'd be hurled sideways with the spit of that artificial gravity machine into the laps of these global leaders. And we were all pretty nervous about that. But I got to experiment with higher speed, a more severe turning radius, and also the idea that the floor itself was much harder than the mats we at Strab usually land on. So one of the things they did was have to go faster and have their ground plant, which we work with because we're grabbing the ground with the bottoms of our feet, and it had to be exactly accurate. And it had to do the things we did sometimes in artificial gravity, the larger machine, but with no errors, with no wobbles, or absolute, well, it would have been the end of my career, in my mind, because Mike Bloomberg has been an ardent supporter of Streb, and I couldn't disappoint him. I would have died. And I knew my dancers wouldn't disappoint him. So the pressure was really pretty high. When we were done with the piece and we got back to Slam and took it apart to take it back to the phenomenal Neil Mazzella, who builds these things for us, the insides were pulverized. It was like sawdust. We had completely destroyed this machine. And we worked with some of the same ideas, but it was interesting for me to see that because of the more rapid speed on a shorter, much briefer turning radius, all of the moves felt totally foreign. It was as if we had never tried to occupy in that way and then had to navigate the forces that got promulgated just because you had a shorter turning radius. And some of the things we experimented with on the larger machine, we congealed to fit onto this machine. And it was a lot of pressure, and the dancers were spectacular. The other thing I wanted to mention with this machine is, which was also true of the artificial gravity machine, is you've got this gorgeous square where the control person, Justin Ross, stood there, and he had to deal with stopping and starting and the speeds and have them exact and understand what the dancers were going through and what the choreography was. And so there's this beautiful, magician in the closet right there in full view, very seriously doing as avid a job as the dancers are doing, but slightly different. And he was perfect every time. And every so often the machine would just die because we were slamming the floor too much. And all we did was pray that it wouldn't die in these particular 3.5 minutes.